number 3 is Daviyon Nixon, who I really like. Unfortunately, I can't talk about him too much because Nick Kendall is a big Iowa fan, and that will go against everything I stand for. But he reminds me a lot of Fletcher Cox, who with the Philadelphia Eagles, with what he brings in. Fletcher Cox was elite at shooting gaps when he came out of Mississippi State. That's what Daviyon Nixon, that's what he does best. He shoots gaps extremely well. There is a bit of a concern because he had a solid 2019 season, but he really exploded onto the scene in 2020. So there's some concerns about that. And adding to that concern is he still needs more time. This is a guy who this 2 to 3 year typical timeline for defensive linemen to develop, it's going to be needed to the max with Daviyon Nixon, probably closer to 3 years before he really becomes this elite defensive lineman in the NFL. And he's got good scheme versatility, I think, in my opinion anyways. I've talked to multiple people who believe that he's just a 3 technique and a 4-3 front. And I just don't agree with that. He's a guy who, as long as you're playing a single gap system, meaning that he can shoot these gaps, which 2 gapping is you're kind of controlling the offensive lineman and keeping an eye on both gaps on both sides of you. 1 gap is you're picking 1 gap and you're just shooting it, trying to get through it, and getting the edge, the outside shoulder of that whatever offensive lineman it is who's controlling that gap. And I think that's what he does well. And that's what Vic Fangio's defense asks a lot of their 2 defensive ends. Mike Purcell, he 2 gaps quite a bit, but Shelby Harris, Draymond Jones, these are guys that are going to be 1 gapping. And Daviyon Nixon, he's a guy who you can add, develop. By Shelby Harris, he's only been brought back for 3 years. Daviyon Nixon, I think he's going to take those full 3 years to really develop. And in the 2nd or 3rd round, depending on where he's there, I think he's a good option to sit there and pick up, continue to develop, and compete with McDelvin Najim in a few years to replace Shelby Harris. Or even Draymond Jones if Denver doesn't extend him because his contract is going to be up in just the next couple of years.